At 2:048 on November 28, 1944, Commander Joseph Enright crouched in the conning tower of USS Archerfish, SS-311, watching through the periscope as the largest warship in the world cut through the black waters 12 miles ahead. 36 years old, 12 war patrols, 0 confirmed kills. The Japanese had just launched a supercarrier larger than anything the Americans had afloat, 72,000 tons displacement. Enright had been hunting it for 6 hours. If he failed tonight, the carrier would reach the Kure Naval District by morning, disappear into protected waters, and possibly change the balance of power in the Pacific. The pressure was suffocating. Archerfish was alone. No wolf pack. No air support. Just one Gato-class submarine, 312 feet long, 2,424 tons surfaced displacement, and a skipper who had already been relieved of command once for missing targets. Enright had graduated from the Naval Academy in 1933, 11th in his class of 441 midshipmen. He served aboard destroyers first, then transferred to submarines in 1936. By 1942, he was executive officer aboard USS Dace. In May 1943, he received his first command, USS Dace, SS-247. His first war patrol as skipper was a disaster. 4 separate attacks on Japanese convoys, 4 failures. He fired torpedoes at extreme range. They missed. He approached too cautiously. Targets escaped. He hesitated at critical moments. Ships slipped away. In August 1943, Admiral Charles Lockwood, Commander Submarine Force Pacific, relieved Enright of command. The official reason was aggressive enough patrol. The real reason was simpler. Enright couldn't sink anything. That should have ended his career. Most skippers relieved of command never got a second chance. They transferred to shore duty, trained new crews, disappeared into administrative roles. But Enright had something most failed skippers didn't. He understood what he had done wrong. He studied his patrol reports obsessively. He analyzed every failed attack. He identified his mistakes, the excessive caution, the long-range shots, the hesitation. He knew if he ever got another submarine, he would operate differently, closer, faster, more aggressive. In April 1944, Admiral Lockwood made an unusual decision. He gave Enright a second command. USS Archerfish, SS-311, fresh from overhaul at Mare Island Naval Shipyard. The crew was experienced. The boat was reliable, and Enright was a different skipper now. His first patrol aboard Archerfish in May 1944 had been productive. 2 confirmed merchant ships sunk. His second patrol in July had been better. 3 more ships destroyed. By September, he had proven himself. The hesitation was gone. The long-range shots were gone. Enright closed to point-blank range and fired. Now, in November 1944, Archerfish was running her 5th war patrol. The assigned patrol area was off Tokyo Bay, hunting targets leaving the Japanese home waters. On November 28th at 11:45 hours, Archerfish received an urgent ultra message from Pearl Harbor, Japanese carrier departing Yokosuka Naval Arsenal, course 240 degrees, speed estimated 18 knots, destination unknown. The message was based on decrypted Japanese communications. American codebreakers had intercepted orders directing a major warship to depart Yokosuka and proceed to Kure Naval District for final fitting out. The size of the vessel wasn't specified. Its exact capabilities weren't known, but the message classified it as a carrier, and anything large enough to merit an ultra alert was worth intercepting. Enright plotted the intercept course immediately. If the carrier maintained 18 knots on a heading of 240 degrees, it would pass south of Archerfish's current position sometime after dark. Enright ordered the submarine to proceed south at maximum surface speed. Archerfish's 4 Fairbanks Morse diesel engines could push the boat to 20 knots surfaced. Enright needed every knot to reach the intercept point before the carrier passed. The problem was simple mathematics. The carrier had a 6-hour head start. If it maintained 18 knots, it would cover 108 nautical miles in those 6 hours. Archerfish was 40 miles from the projected intercept point. At 20 knots, the submarine would reach that point in 2 hours, but if Enright's calculations were wrong by even a few miles, the carrier would slip past in the darkness. Submarines hunted by probability. You calculated where a target would be, positioned yourself along that path, and hoped your mathematics were correct. Miss by 5 miles, and you never saw the target. At 1600 hours, Archerfish submerged to periscope depth. Standard doctrine for daylight operations near the Japanese home islands. Japanese aircraft patrolled constantly. Being caught on the surface meant depth charges and probable destruction. Enright raised the periscope every 10 minutes, scanning the horizon for aircraft, surface ships, anything that might compromise the intercept. At 1730 hours, the sun set. Darkness came quickly at this latitude in late November. By 1800 hours, visibility was near zero. Enright ordered Archerfish to surface. The submarine needed to recharge batteries and make maximum speed toward the intercept point. If you want to see how Enright's 6-hour pursuit through total darkness turned out, please hit that like button. It helps us share these forgotten stories with more people. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Enright. At 20:04, 8 hours, the lookouts spotted a shape on the horizon, bearing 250 degrees, range approximately 12 miles. Enright climbed to the bridge. The night was moonless. Heavy clouds obscured the stars. Visibility was less than 2 miles in any direction, but dead ahead, barely visible against the sky, was a massive dark shape moving northeast. The carrier. It had to be. Nothing else would be that large. Enright ordered the tracking party to begin plotting the target's course and speed. The tracking party consisted of 3 officers and 2 enlisted men stationed in the conning tower. They used bearing measurements from the periscope or bridge, combined with time intervals, to calculate target speed, course, and range. The process required precise observations and careful mathematics. One error could throw off the entire solution. The fire control officer reported the target's course as 055 degrees, speed 20 knots, not 18 knots as estimated in the Ultra message. The carrier was moving faster than intelligence predicted. That changed everything. At 20 knots, the carrier would reach Cure by dawn. Enright had maybe 8 hours to intercept, but intercepting a target moving at 20 knots from 12 miles away was nearly impossible. Archerfish's maximum surface speed was 20 knots. The submarine couldn't overtake the carrier. It could only try to cut it off by taking a shorter course. Enright studied the plot. The carrier was heading 055 degrees. If Archerfish proceeded on a course of 030 degrees at maximum speed, the 2 vessels might converge. Might. The geometry was brutal. The carrier had superior speed and a direct course to safety. Archerfish had to cross the carrier's path at an angle, hoping to arrive at the intersection point before the carrier passed. If Enright miscalculated by even 500 yards, the carrier would slip by in the darkness. He ordered course 030 degrees, all ahead flank. The 4 diesel engines roared to maximum power. Archerfish surged forward through the black water. The submarine's wake glowed with bioluminescence. Phosphorescent plankton churned by the propellers created a visible trail extending hundreds of yards behind the boat. Any Japanese lookout seeing that wake would know a submarine was nearby. But Enright had no choice. Without maximum speed, there was no intercept. At 2112 hours, the carrier changed course, new heading 040 degrees. The tracking party recalculated. The carrier was zigzagging. Standard anti-submarine procedure. Change course every 10 or 15 minutes. Make it impossible for a submarine to predict your position. The tactic worked. Enright's intercept course was now wrong. He ordered a new course, 025 degrees. Archerfish turned. The carrier changed course again at 2127 hours. New heading 050 degrees. The tracking party recalculated again. This continued for 2 hours. The carrier zigzagged through the darkness. Enright adjusted Archerfish's course with each zig. The submarine never closed inside 10 miles. The carrier's escorts were visible now. 4 destroyers in a diamond formation around the carrier. They were small, fast, and deadly. One depth charge pattern from any of those destroyers would cripple or destroy Archerfish. Enright had to avoid detection while somehow closing the range. At 22:15 hours, one of the escorts detected Archerfish. The destroyer turned directly toward the submarine, range 6,000 yards. The destroyer's lookouts had probably spotted the bioluminescent wake. Enright ordered dive. The klaxon sounded throughout the submarine. Lookouts dropped through the bridge hatch. The officer of the deck followed. Enright came down last, slamming the hatch behind him. The ballast tank vents opened, seawater flooded into the tanks. Archerfish's bow angled down. The submarine slipped beneath the surface at 22:16 hours. Enright stopped the descent at 150 feet. The destroyer passed overhead at 22:19 hours. Sonar tracked the destroyer's propeller noise. Fast screws. The destroyer was moving at high speed, probably 30 knots. It passed within 400 yards. Close enough to hear through the hull. The crew stood silent. Nobody moved. The destroyer's sonar was active. Enright could hear the pings echoing through the water, high-frequency pulses searching for a submarine. But Archerfish was silent and deep. The pings didn't detect her. The destroyer made 2 more passes. Each time it came close, but not close enough to establish solid sonar contact. At 2370 hours, the destroyer gave up. It turned and rejoined the carrier. Enright waited another 10 minutes, then ordered Archerfish to periscope depth. He raised the scope and searched for the carrier. It was gone, disappeared into the darkness. The 2-hour surface chase had ended with nothing. Enright had lost contact. He could have given up. Most skippers would have. The carrier was gone. The night was black. Finding a target that had already slipped past was nearly impossible. But Enright had been here before. He had missed targets on his first command because he gave up too early. Not this time. He plotted the carrier's last known course and speed, heading 040 degrees, speed 20 knots. If the carrier maintained that course, it would be 15 miles northeast of Archerfish's current position. Enright ordered a new intercept course. He surfaced Archerfish at 22:45 hours and resumed the pursuit. The chase continued through the midnight hours. Archerfish ran on the surface at 20 knots. The carrier was invisible ahead. Enright navigated by calculation and hope. Every 30 minutes, he adjusted course based on the carrier's probable position. At 0030 hours on November 29th, a lookout spotted something, a shape on the horizon, bearing 035 degrees, range unknown. It could be the carrier. It could be a cloud bank. The visibility was still near zero. Enright closed the range carefully. At 0048 hours, the shape resolved into a massive vessel. The carrier. Enright had found it again. But the geometry was wrong. The carrier was northeast of Archerfish, moving away at 20 knots. The submarine was behind the target, in the worst possible position. To attack, Enright needed to be ahead of the carrier or on its beam. From behind, the approach was impossible. The carrier's speed matched Archerfish's. The submarine couldn't overtake it. Enright made another decision. He would try an end-around. The tactic involved surfacing, running ahead of the target at maximum speed, then diving and waiting for the target to come to you. It required precise navigation and perfect timing. But it was the only option. Enright ordered course, 050 degrees. Archerfish turned to parallel the carrier's course. The submarine ran northeast, trying to get ahead of the target. The end-around took 90 minutes. Archerfish ran at 20 knots on a course that slowly angled ahead of the carrier. At 0215 hours, Enright estimated the submarine was finally ahead of the target. He ordered a course change to 140 degrees, turning back toward the carrier's projected path. At 0230 hours, he ordered dive. Archerfish submerged to 65 feet and waited. The carrier should arrive in approximately 40 minutes. Enright raised the periscope every 5 minutes, searching for the target. The periscope optics were powerful, but in the absolute darkness, they were nearly useless. Enright couldn't see more than 1,000 yards. If the carrier passed outside that range, he would never know it was there. At 0255 hours, Enright saw lights. Dead ahead. Multiple ships. The carrier and its escorts were coming directly toward Archerfish. The end-around had worked. The tracking party went to work. Bearings, ranges, course, speed. The carrier was on heading 055 degrees. Speed had decreased to 18 knots. The 4 destroyers were still in diamond formation. Range to the carrier was 6,000 yards. Closing. Enright needed to get inside 2,000 yards for a reliable shot, but the destroyers complicated everything. If Archerfish moved toward the carrier, the submarine would cross directly into the path of the escorts. The destroyers would detect the submarine and attack before Enright could fire. He studied the formation carefully. The lead destroyer was 2,000 yards ahead of the carrier. 2 destroyers flanked the carrier at 1,500 yards on each beam. The 4th destroyer followed 2,000 yards behind. There was a gap. Between the lead destroyer and the carrier's starboard beam, the spacing was slightly wider, maybe 200 yards more than on the port side. Enright decided to thread that gap. At 0310 hours, Archerfish began moving forward, dead, slow. The submarine crept toward the carrier at 2 knots. The electric motors were silent. No noise, no vibration, just the faint sound of water flowing past the hull. The lead destroyer passed overhead at 0312 hours. Enright watched through the periscope. The destroyer was massive, 2,000 tons displacement, 118 meters long. Its propellers churned the water directly above Archerfish. The noise was deafening inside the submarine. But the destroyer didn't detect anything. It kept moving, passing over the submarine and continuing northeast. Archerfish continued forward. The carrier was directly ahead now, range 3,000 yards. The periscope view was stunning. Enright had never seen a carrier this large. It dwarfed everything. The flight deck seemed to stretch forever. The island's superstructure rose like a building from the deck. This wasn't a normal carrier. This was something unprecedented. The carrier was Shinano, the largest aircraft carrier ever built. 72,000 tons full load displacement, 266 meters long, 36.3 meters beam. The ship had started life as the 3rd Yamato-class battleship. Construction began in May 1940 at Yokosuka Naval Arsenal. The hull was designed to mount 9 18.1-inch guns, the same weapons that made Yamato and Musashi the most powerful battleships ever built. But after the Battle of Midway in June 1942, the Japanese realized they needed carriers more than battleships. Construction halted in December 1942. Engineers redesigned the hull. They removed the battleship turrets and barbettes. They added a flight deck. They transformed a battleship into a carrier. The conversion took 2 years. Shinano was commissioned on November 19, 1944, 9 days earlier. The ship was still incomplete. The damage control systems weren't finished. The watertight integrity wasn't tested. The crew wasn't fully trained. But Japanese high command needed the carrier operational. American submarines controlled the waters around Japan. American aircraft controlled the skies. Moving Shinano from Yokosuka to Kure required a night transit with minimal escort. The Japanese believed the carrier was unsinkable. Its hull had 16-inch armor plate designed to withstand battleship shells. Its internal compartments were subdivided to contain flooding. The ship could theoretically survive multiple torpedo hits and remain afloat. Enright didn't know any of this. He only knew the target was enormous and closing at 18 knots, range 2,000 yards. He needed to get closer. Standard doctrine called for firing torpedoes at 1,000 to 1,500 yards. Closer was better. Less time for the target to maneuver. Higher probability of hits. Enright ordered Archerfish to continue closing. At 03:15 hours, the starboard escort destroyer turned toward the submarine. Enright saw it through the periscope. The destroyer was adjusting position, moving to tighten the formation. If it continued its turn, it would pass directly over Archerfish. Enright had seconds to decide. Dive deeper and avoid detection, but lose the attack, or hold position and hope the destroyer didn't detect the submarine. He held position. The destroyer passed 300 yards to starboard. Its sonar was active. Enright heard the pings, high-frequency pulses, searching. But Archerfish was silent, and the water conditions weren't ideal for sonar. The destroyer didn't detect anything. It completed its turn and resumed position on the carrier's beam. Enright exhaled. The submarine was inside 1,500 yards now. The carrier filled the periscope optics. Enright could see details, portholes, gun emplacements, the massive island superstructure, aircraft tied down on the flight deck. The ship was incredible, but Enright wasn't here to admire it. He was here to sink it. Range 1,400 yards. The carrier was on a steady course, speed steady at 18 knots. The tracking party had a perfect solution. Course 055 degrees. Speed 18 knots. Range 1,400 yards. Bearing constant. Enright made his final decision. He would fire 6 torpedoes, all from the forward torpedo tubes, spread pattern, 3 aimed at the bow, 3 aimed amidships. He wanted to ensure hits. At 1,400 yards, the torpedoes would run for approximately 90 seconds. The carrier would travel 750 yards in that time. Enright calculated the lead angle. He ordered the torpedo data computer to set the solution. The TDC was a mechanical computer that calculated firing solutions based on target course, speed, range, and bearing. The operator input the data using dials and cranks. The machine computed the gyro angle for each torpedo. When everything was set, the skipper gave the order to fire. At 03:17 hours on November 29, 1944, Commander Joseph Enright gave that order. Tube 1 fired at 03:17 hours, 00 seconds. The torpedo left the tube with a burst of compressed air. Archerfish shuddered. The torpedo accelerated to 46 knots and headed toward Shinano. Tube 2 fired 6 seconds later. Then Tube 3, then Tube 4, then Tube 5, then Tube 6. 6 Mark 14 torpedoes, each carrying 643 pounds of Torpex explosive, running at 46 knots toward the largest warship in the world. Enright watched through the periscope. The torpedoes left visible wakes, white trails across the black water. He counted seconds. The carrier continued on course. No evasive maneuvers. The lookouts hadn't spotted the wakes. At 90 seconds, Enright heard the first explosion. A deep, heavy boom that resonated through the water and into Archerfish's hull. Then, a second explosion. Then, a third. Then, a fourth. 4 hits. Through the periscope, Enright saw fire erupt along Shinano's starboard side. The explosions were massive. Orange fireballs climbed into the night sky. The carrier staggered. Its course wavered. The escorts immediately went active. Destroyers turned toward Archerfish's position. Their sonar flooded the water with pings. Enright ordered deep. Archerfish dove to 300 feet. The submarine went silent. Rigged for depth charge. The first destroyer arrived overhead at 0320 hours. Enright heard the screws. Fast. Turbulent. The destroyer was moving at attack speed. Then the depth charges began. The first pattern dropped at 0321 hours. 6 depth charges set for 150 feet. They detonated in sequence. The explosions hammered Archerfish. The hull groaned. Light bulbs shattered. Fragments of cork insulation rained down from the overhead. Men grabbed handholds to stay on their feet. The second pattern dropped at 0323 hours. Closer. The explosions were louder. The submarine's hull rang like a bell. In the forward torpedo room, a pipe fitting cracked. Water sprayed into the compartment. The torpedo crew secured the leak with emergency patching. A third pattern dropped at 03:26 hours. This one was directly overhead. The detonations were catastrophic. The entire submarine shook. Equipment broke loose. The depth gauge cracked. The gyro compass lost alignment. But Archerfish survived. The Gato-class submarines were built tough. Welded steel hull rated to 300 feet. Crush depth estimated at 450 feet. The depth charges were set too shallow. They exploded above the submarine. The shock waves were severe, but not fatal. Enright ordered the submarine deeper. Archerfish descended to 400 feet, beyond rated depth. The hull creaked. The pressure was immense, but the welding held. The destroyers continued the search for 90 minutes. Pattern after pattern of depth charges. Most were too shallow. A few were close. One was so close it knocked out the main electrical panel. The submarine went dark. Emergency lighting kicked in. Battery-powered lamps cast dim red light through the compartments. The crew worked in silence, repairing damage, stopping leaks, restoring systems. At 0500 hours, the depth charging stopped. The destroyers had lost contact. They returned to the carrier. Enright waited another hour, then brought Archerfish to periscope depth. He raised the scope and searched for Shinano. The carrier was 8 miles northeast, still afloat, still moving, but slowly, maybe 8 knots. It was listing to starboard. The 4 torpedo hits had flooded multiple compartments. The carrier was wounded. Enright wanted to pursue, fire another spread of torpedoes, finish the job. But Archerfish was damaged. The depth charging had cracked pipes, broken equipment, compromised the hull integrity. The submarine needed repairs, and the escorts were still active. Pursuing the carrier meant another depth charge attack. Enright made the decision to break contact. He ordered Archerfish to dive deep and head south. Aboard Shinano, the situation was catastrophic. 4 torpedo hits had breached the starboard hull in 4 locations. Water flooded into engineering spaces, crew compartments, and storage areas. The carrier's pumps couldn't keep up. The ship listed 10 degrees to starboard. Captain Toshio Abe ordered counter-flooding to correct the list. Engineers flooded portside compartments. The list decreased to 5 degrees, but the overall flooding continued. Shinano was taking on thousands of tons of seawater every hour. The damage control teams worked desperately. They shored up bulkheads with timbers. They sealed doors and hatches. They rigged emergency pumps. But the ship wasn't ready for combat. The watertight integrity was incomplete. The crew wasn't trained in damage control procedures. Many compartments couldn't be sealed because the doors weren't installed yet. Water spread through the ship unchecked. At 0600 hours, Shinano's list increased to 15 degrees. The propellers were losing efficiency. Speed dropped to 6 knots. Captain Abe realized the ship was doomed. He ordered abandon ship at 0800 hours. But abandoning a carrier with 2,400 crew members in heavy seas was chaos. The destroyers moved alongside. Men jumped from the flight deck onto the destroyer decks. Others went into the water wearing life jackets. The destroyers picked up survivors. At 10:17 hours on November 29, 1944, Shinano capsized. The massive carrier rolled onto its starboard side. The flight deck disappeared beneath the water. The hull floated upside down for 3 minutes. Then the bow dipped. The stern rose. The entire ship slid beneath the surface. Shinano sank in 4,000 meters of water, 65 miles southeast of Cape Shiono. 1,435 crew members died. Most went down with the ship. Others drowned in the heavy seas before rescuers could reach them. The 4 destroyers recovered 1,080 survivors. They returned to Kure Naval District and reported the loss. Japanese Naval Command immediately classified the entire incident. No public announcements, no acknowledgement. Shinano's loss was a state secret. the largest warship ever sunk in combat, destroyed by a single submarine, 17 days after commissioning. The humiliation was too severe to admit. Archerfish returned to Guam on December 15, 1944. Enright filed his patrol report. He claimed one large carrier sunk. Intelligence officers were skeptical. No carrier that large existed in the Japanese fleet. The largest Japanese carrier was Taiho at 37,000 tons. Enright claimed 72,000 tons. The numbers didn't match anything in intelligence files. The claim was classified as probable, not confirmed. It took 15 months to confirm Enright's claim. In March 1946, American occupation forces in Japan discovered Japanese naval records. The records documented Shinano's loss, 72,000 tons. Sunk by submarine on November 29, 1944. Position matched Archerfish's attack. The claim was confirmed. Commander Joseph Enright had sunk the largest warship ever destroyed by a submarine. The record still stands today. Enright received the Navy Cross in January 1945. The citation praised his aggressive pursuit and accurate torpedo fire. He continued serving in submarines through 1946. He retired from the Navy in 1963 as a rear admiral. He never spoke publicly about Shinano. The sinking remained classified until Japanese records were released in the 1950s. By then, Enright had moved on. He worked as a civilian consultant. He lived quietly in California. He died in December 1991 at age 83. Archerfish completed 5 more war patrols. The submarine sank additional ships, but nothing matched Shinano. After the war, Archerfish was decommissioned and scrapped. The submarine that killed the giant was cut apart in a New Jersey shipyard. Nothing remains, except photographs and patrol reports. Shinano's wreck lies in 4,000 meters of water, too deep for salvage, too deep for exploration. The carrier sits on the ocean floor exactly where it sank in 1944. 2,400 men served aboard Shinano. 1,435 died. Many were young, teenagers, 20-year-olds. They went to sea on a ship that was never truly ready. They died because Japanese high command rushed the carrier into service. They died because one submarine skipper refused to give up during a 6-hour pursuit through total darkness. Joseph Enright proved something important that night. Persistence matters. Calculation matters. Refusing to quit matters. He had been relieved of command once for missing targets. He could have let that failure define him. Instead, he learned from it. When he got a second chance, he closed to 1,400 yards and fired 6 torpedoes. 4 hit. The largest warship in the world sank. The skipper who couldn't sink anything became the skipper who sank everything. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor, hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about submarine skippers who refused to quit when targets slipped away in darkness. Real people. Real heroism. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching. And thank you for making sure Commander Joseph Enright doesn't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered. And you're helping make that happen.